News.
There's only one voice for our community. The Voice of Africa Radio with Afro Beats on 94 FM.
AB Promotions in conjunction with Awudu Promotions proudly presents
Afro Candy Sunday.
This is not being seen in any nightclub before. To be held at Mystique Nightclub.
Afro Candy Sunday.
There you can expect the cream of artists alongside your footballers and sports entertainment celebrities. All come to be entertained by the finest DJs. Resident DJs are DJ Ice, DJ Sour. They're holding it strong for the Afrobeat team. Guest DJs, DJ Awudu, teaming up with So Good, On Rotation, and Commander B. It's 3-4 ladies before midnight. Each and every Sunday at Mystique Nightclub, 14 Ruby Street, London, SE15 1LL. Off the Old Kent Road, behind KFC, South London. Come and dance to Afrobeat, dancehall, bashment, hip-hop, R&B and funky house. Afro Candy Sundays, each and every Sunday night.
If gospel music is a key to life, let the gospel music lead the way with Reverend Major in the morning.
Afrobeat 94. VOAR. The Voice of Africa Radio.
Me the born me for France, okay. But Yankee I the chill for. Panda never cancel, okay. My mommy born sans.
Good evening to you, listeners of Voice of Africa Radio. Exactly 7 o'clock today, the 23rd of March 2015. I am in the studio with Elizabeth The Rock Jones, UKIP parliamentary candidate for Dartford, a deputy chairwoman for Sadok constituency, Rada Daniel, chairwoman for Palestinian Solidarity Group, Waltham Forest, and also a member of the International Women's Peace Service Palestinian. She's a campaigner for Palestine, a former journalist, and she has gone through a lot, and she'll be sharing the experience with us this evening on Voice of Africa Radio, as we will be discussing the the re-election of Benjamin Netanyahu and it's to the two-state solution in Israel and Palestine. Now we're going to see it as he has descended much into gutters with a statement to win the right people to vote for him to become the prime minister once again in Israel. Lembit Öpik, former deputy, former
everything, leader of the Western Dems,
former MP, Liberal Democrat, is also in the studio with me, as well as Mahmoud, Fiaz, Liberal Democrat, Latin and Wanstead, a human rights activist and a socio-political commentator in the studio with me this evening to talk about this important issue on Voice of Africa Radio, your favorite show, Inside. This week, we had the Chancellor of the Exchequer with his budget, the last budget of this Parliament. Lembit, how do you see the budget of Mr. Osborne?
So looking at it politically, it was quite successful. He was very lucky. Some things have just fallen into his hands, which he couldn't have planned for, and he's got away with. So it looked pretty strong from the outside, but the inside, that's where the problems lie. Once again, they're trying to buy the elderly vote. I have nothing against the elderly. I hope to be there myself one day. But by giving handouts...
I'll join you there.
But by giving handouts to the elderly, which is partly what he's done, he forgets the fact that the older you get, the less you're likely to change your vote. The Lib Dems tried this in 1992 and it didn't work. The second thing is the mountain of debt is unbelievable. This government came in promising to undo the mountain of debt which they inherited from Labour, and they've fallen so far behind in their targets. But as I say, on the upside...
But he has said that this budget is heading towards reducing the debt of Britain to make Britain once again a very successful debt-free country. And he's saying the mountain of debt is piling.
It is getting bigger. They can't deny it. The fact is, we owe far more now now than we did in 2010. And it only takes a small change in the global political system for that to cause enormous problems for us. Any increase in interest rate will massively increase the amount of interest payments the government has to make. Just like somebody who borrows money for a mortgage, if the interest rate goes up, then you pay more. And the second thing is that just in terms of the financial situation, unemployment is down. You can't take that away from them. I don't want to. I don't need the country to be doing badly. Some of the other economic figures are looking good. Growth's looking good. But some of that is, as I say, because he was a bit lucky. Overall, he's done pretty well. Labour have got a bit of a problem there, but whoever gets elected after the next election is going to have to undo the debt.
Elizabeth, first-time buyers are going to have some money from the Chancellor.
That's correct. They're going to have their help to buy ISA. That means they'll get, for every £200 they put in to buy a home, the government's going to give them £50 up to a maximum of £3,000. The personal allowance is going to go up in the first year of the government to 10,800 and then the second year to 11,000. And there's going to be a tax-free allowance and savings. First 1,000 tax-free. If you're a higher tax rate payer, then it's going to be 500. And we've got 1 pence off a pint of beer, 2% off spirit duty, and pensioners can now sell their annuities. Now, it looks like quite a popular budget, but as Lembit quite rightly says, it masks the very, very significant debt. Also, I note that Osborne is trying to encourage the housing market, but of course we have a significant
How do we encourage the housing market by giving the first-time buyer 6,000 or any amount to go into? How would that improve the housing problem that we've got in Britain now?
It probably won't make much of a dent in it. And the problem we have with the housing, of course, is that they're trying to fuel it by public spending. We've got very restrictive planning laws, and of course we've got a massively increasing population coming in, as I say, because we have the free borders with the EU, so we cannot manage the numbers of people coming in who need housing. So it's all quite.
Is that the EU? Elizabeth, how would the EU migrant?
You can always trust you.
The budget. How would it affect the EU migrant coming in? And how does
it's about lack of housing need, lack of housing supply.
But
if we are to believe,
we haven't made any provision for that, have we?
We haven't made it. Well, Osborne hasn't made any provision for that. As I say, he has taken 1 pence off beer duty, and I think everyone should know that 40% of all EU alcohol duty, the entire EU, 40% of the alcohol duty comes from this country. So he's given a small allowance there. And the most disturbing thing I found was that when Ed Ball said he wouldn't change any of the key pledges, so we have, I would say perhaps for the first time, Labour and Conservative agreeing a budget. And I would say this heralds the demise of the Labour Party. What is the point of the Labour Party? They're no longer acting as an opposition party. Perhaps it's time to die.
Well, Mahmoud, now the budget is on the looking at the importation of alcohol, the taxes on alcohol, and what they are saying the budget couldn't cover.
Well, let me just touch on all aspects of the budget, because it's not just alcohol, there's many things. First of all, let's touch housing. Elizabeth Jones and I think spoke about housing. You can never get 100% housing anyway, or 100% employment in a country. It's an impossible goal to go for. Any country that's gone for has generally failed, because there needs to be a supply and demand ratio. On houses, if you take back the history, when the property market was starting to collapse, what did Labour do? They brought out the seller's pack, which meant that before putting a house on the market, you have to have an EPC, which is fine, that's no problem. You have to do searches yourself. No buyer is going to depend on searches done by a person they're buying from themselves. It's a waste of time, waste of paper, and added bureaucracy to the housing market. Then or if you want to develop your house, make it bigger. The local authority had such a hold on you that the book was actually 500 pages big. When the coalition came in, we changed that book to about 50 pages. So what was the 450 pages saying? What were they for? Nothing more than bureaucracy. Then it really boils down to housing. Under 13 years of Labour, local houses built, guess, you astonishing figure, 60. In 30 years, 60 houses were built under local authority. More than that's been built by the coalition in 4 years. Conclusive proof. Two heads are better than one. Then we get on to another thing. Most of your listeners remember
but
that
if you have got more buildings, then why are we still complaining? And even the coalition itself wouldn't.
I will get on to that.
You wouldn't agree that enough of the building infrastructure has been.
May I just say, Adam?
Let me just keep continuing so that I can cover everything.
The big thing about the budget, as Lembit rightly says, yes. The budget is beautiful makeup on an ugly face, because as Lembit rightly says, we are on the precipice of a massive debt crisis.
Because the books are not balanced. Now the expenditure is over 760 something billion, whilst the income is 614.
Madam, the official national debt figure is about 1.6 trillion.
Would you allow someone else to speak, please?
And
Elizabeth,
if you look at the Institute of Economic Affairs figures,
rude, please.
It's about 4.8 trillion. That's 78,000 pounds per person in the UK.
Let's give him the platform, and we will come back. We'll come back to you. Yes, we'll come back to you.
Please,
Mahmoud, now,
the housing, Elizabeth, and speak. Other people don't try.
Mahmoud, the housing that you're talking about. Now, how much money did the Chancellor put into housing or building infrastructure?
Let me just answer some of the questions from A to Z. And also, I was interrupted, so I can't sort of answer it if he's taken time away from me. But basically, now the second thing is housing. You need to, so once the brokers has been cut, people have been able to build, buy, sell. So the housing market's on the up. We're positive about it. Now, housing prices are also going up, which people may look at as a negative kind of thing. But believe me, it's actually a good thing when houses go up. What that means is people are earning more, people are more secure in their job, and lenders are willing to lend money. So that's a positive side. Second, we came on to was the creditworthiness, and Lembit Öpik is exactly right. It is rather like a mortgage. And when we took over, this country was on a brink of getting its AAA rating down to triple.
So how far has the coalition?
You're not allowing me to finish. Right. So what happens? The cuts. I don't know. You could argue were necessary or not necessary, but the thing is, the credit rating stayed of this country. Mortgage rates did not come up. Nobody lost their home, and our economy is now getting better.
With all these cuts, the Biden cut, how much has have you been able to reduce the debt of the country?
Not at all, Adam.
Right.
Not at all.
Let me again. That the country is rather like playing with figures. And you remember last time we was talking about the model figure. There's different models you go by. You can either look at the model overall figure, or you can have proportional to the earnings of the person, or proportional to individual earning. So the thing is, the fact is, this country, when we took over, was not creditworthy. Now it's creditworthy.
But we were getting money from the international. When we wanted to borrow money, we could have still borrowed money.
Whether we get more money or less, no, you couldn't. Let me explain to you why.
I remember the Chancellor and the Prime Minister were saying, if we can't sort it, the IMF will come and sort it for us. Scaremongering to just get British people to prepare our mind for us to cut.
So how do you explain Greece then? Did you want us to be second Greece?
During
the Calahan region,
on this one, I do think. I mean, much as I think that you're making a valiant effort, and not just going to totally condemn the budget, though I think there's a lot of luck in it. There is no doubt what Elizabeth says is right, and what I'm saying is right about the debt. It's impossible to deny that we now have the biggest debt in the history of the United Kingdom. That's a big bombshell.
But would you forget, that actually shows our creditworthiness. That's a credit that we can borrow more. If I get a bigger mortgage, it shows what creditworthiness I have.
The rating agencies will collaborate with government to just peddle mongering to scare people to execute their policies.
Rada, very, very. My issue isn't that it's necessarily wrong to have the big debt. It's wrong to promise something that you don't deliver, and the Tories promised.
Well, unfortunately, Osborne isn't any answer for that.
The Tories promised to sort out the mess that Labour left, and instead they've made it worse. That's what I'm annoyed about.
Well, Lembit, I have to say it is wrong to have such a big debt, because we have to service that every year in the international money markets. And the cost of servicing that debt is more than our defence budget. Imagine if we could renegotiate or reduce that, we would have more money to spend in this country.
Okay,
Elizabeth, if in case we have any coalition with UKIP,
yes,
and you are made the Chancellor or Deputy Chancellor of Exchequer,
yes.
What are the policies you are going to put in place to reduce the British
Number
debt?
1, we're going to end inheritance tax. Number 2, we're going to increase the personal allowance to £13,000 per annum.
That's a Lib Dem policy, by the way. More or less.
Well, share alike.
You're learning.
Thank you, Lembit.
Give me a couple of months.
With regard to tax, we want to bring down the 40% tax to 35 pence in the pound from 42,000 to 55,000, and then that becomes 40 pence in the pound. And we want to inject 3 billion into the NHS. How we will do this?
Where are you going to get the 3 billion
Right, number
from?
one, we're going to leave the EU. That's end of that. No more £65 million a day. That end of that. Number two.
But would it be easy for us to leave the EU?
We could do it like that if we repealed
How can
the
we
European
do that if the British
Act.
people says we want to stay in the EU?
Well, if the British people want to stay in the EU, and that's a fair and open and appropriate.
So if we decide to stay in the EU, where are you going to get the money to fund your
We're going
budget?
to stop the HS2 project, the high-speed train from London to Birmingham.
The HS2 is just 17 billion.
That's 80 billion. Right, so there's 80 billion there, foreign aid, 11 billion.
The 80 billion is all transport infrastructure from now till 2050.
No, 2017. No, it's a white elephant. We simply don't need it. That money can be diverted elsewhere.
I agree with Elizabeth on that. The problem is when you add up all the figures that Elizabeth is putting forward, it's all cuts to the income of the country, my friend. And
that's what people
don't really see how the books balance.
It's smoke and mirrors
with UKIP.
Well, we can get 3 billion from our foreign aid budget. Our foreign aid budget's 11 billion.
You've just taken 5p off the top rate of income tax. I think that's more of a loss than the saving you're making there. The £13,000 increase, I happen to agree with that.
Mad, that would actually affect the richest, not the poorest.
The budget. So basically, I mean, I actually happen to agree with a lot of the things you're saying, but the consequence is an increase in the national debt in the short term. I think you shouldn't be promising to cut something like the national debt.
Now, the budget on the future of the country, talking about training of the youth and then trying to have skill for the youth.
Well, that's going to
did we have any coherent allocation of money to doing that in the budget that was presented to the Parliament by the Chancellor of Exchequer?
It was kind of a sideshow. I wouldn't say this was the education budget in that sense. No, that's not what the battle
That said, though, they have pledged 1.25 billion for mental health for the youth. And it is pledged also to have 600 million faster broadband. But all these pledges,
by the way, the youth one is actually Liberal Democrat policy.
All these pledges for 600 million for broadband. We're going to have 1.25 billion for youth mental health. And again, they're committed to the HS2 project, which is 80 billion, committed to ongoing EU membership. Where the hell's the money coming from? We're having falling tax receipts. It may well be more people are in employment, but they are low-paid jobs, zero contracts. We're having lower tax receipts, so I don't know where the money's coming from.
I'm going to be quiet now because I want to hear what the adult wants to say.
Yes, Rada, on the budget, your general view as a member of, as a citizen of Great Britain.
Exactly. I'm not a politician, but I can be a voice of the people.
Yes.
Being a Londoner, and I'm not going to kind of make a judgment of a budget. I've heard about it on the media, and I have my opinions. I just want to say what worries me as a person who lives in this country, and that is the fact that hundreds of thousands of people work on 0 hours contracts. They have no certainty in their lives. They have no idea whether they'll be able to buy their food, pay their rent this month, this week. That is a very worrying development. The workers' rights have been stripped to the bone. Housing, everybody mentioned. I have no idea how rich one needs to be nowadays. You need to work in a city on a massive bonuses to buy a one-bedroom flat in Leighton nowadays. We would never be able, nobody I know would be able to buy where they live now, which we did maybe 20 years ago. That is absolutely causing a serious sociological earthquake in a country because middle-aged people have to leave their parents, depend on their parents to help them buy properties. It creates
But the government is saying, I'm going to help you with some money to first-time buyers. I'm going to help you with some money to buy a house. Isn't it positive?
See, how much money do you need to make, even if you have a government help, if you have to spend 100,000 on a one-bedroom flat? How much your joint incomes or your one income needs to be to actually be able to afford anything, even if government is helping you with that? Yeah. So just one more thing I want to say before I finish. I am extremely worried about these massive cuts to everything, to basic services like education, like health, etc. Even though there have been money committed to mental health services, and also I'm very concerned as a citizen about the privatization of again essential services like prisons, like refugee services, who are very dodgy companies like G4S and Serco, who actually are not doing a good job, and they without any consequence for them. They seem to be getting more and more public contracts and doing criminal things within those contracts without being held accountable. NHS, another example, they're always saying, oh, very little of it is being privatized, but you can see a creeping privatization which is going to actually undermine our right to having these very basic services.
Well, Lembit.
Yes.
Now, we're talking about this budget and how it relates to each and every one of us, our socio-economic development in the country. What is the way forward if we are going to have a Great Britain that is powerful enough to employ not a 0-hour contract to let people have where they are to buy their homes and live as a normal human being? What is the way forward?
Now we're in the realm of opinion. I studied economics at university and I gave up on it because I thought it was a pseudoscience rather than a proper science. But my judgment as a politician is this: we have to borrow more. I think where the Conservatives went wrong was promising to borrow less.
The coalition.
Well, okay, fair enough, fair play. Lib Dem Conservative coalition, but the Lib Dems have prevented some of the cuts that you rightly have described as dangerous. It would have been worse if the Conservatives had governed alone. And the promises the Conservatives are making, if they govern alone, are exactly the things that we've just heard are frightening. Bigger cuts.
That's what they appeal to.
The worst spending cuts will be in the next 2 years if the Conservatives win again. So
but the Great Depression in America, they capitalized on it to put in more capital investment. What the country is needed.
I agree, but if you do that you have to find the money from somewhere. I would borrow and spend. Basically, there are two options here. You either borrow and spend it and hope that the new extra money will make things better, or you cut and suffer and hope that after the suffering things improve.
But did we achieve our aim by cutting to the bone?
No, I don't think so. I think as you've just heard from what I knew would be a mature and informed voice, instead of the three children are here every Monday, you basically hear that the cuts have happened and we're not, the least wealthy are in a terrible state. 0 hours contracts, very disempowered. So we're actually lucky that things aren't worse. But if you can be lucky, then you can be unlucky. And for example, if Greece leaves the European Union, for some of the reasons that I'm sure Elizabeth can explain, that's really bad news for us, because we are tied in to what happens in the European Union. So my view is, if I was the Chancellor, I'd spend, I'd invest, I'd get things going, and the extra tax I'd use to try and start paying things back. By the way, Japan has an enormous national debt, but they somehow kind of make things work. It's not perfect, but they work on the basis that they borrow a lot, they can keep going, and when they need more money, they carry on borrowing it. They've been doing that for about 40 years now.
Well, you still tune into Voice of Africa Radio. We would leave this and go on with the NHS and the PFI. The brief history of PFI was a policy which was started in Australia, and they used it they used it more in Australia than Great Britain. And the Conservative administration, which was John Major, started it in 1992, and New Labour took it and ran with it. Now PFI, the coalition, has also taken it. Instead of pausing on, they are running extra mile to get it changed, to give it to their friends in authority, just as businesses, just as Rada said, the business is becoming very powerful in Great Britain. They're doing everything and go away with murder because we can't touch them. The politicians have made them so strong. PFI, under the coalition, 61 PFI contracts has been given, wealth over £69.9 billion under Mr. Osborne, which of course they did criticize Labour for doing it. And this is not PFI, it's just privatization, not marketization of the institutions like NHS, education, or others. Now we keep on blaming Labour for the woes of the NHS. Elizabeth.
Yes, Adam.
As we are talking about PFI now, inviting the public finances into National Health Service, has it helped in any way?
Okay, well, I just want to take the listeners back actually to the history of PFI. And there is a theory that PFI actually, as you say, began in 1992 with John Major. And the reason for that was because of the Maastricht Treaty. The Maastricht Treaty of the EU gave severe budgetary limits to government spend. And in fact, member countries were only allowed to spend 3% of their GDP on government spend. Hence, there was very, very limited capital for public spending. So we can safely say that the EU actually forced PFI onto this country.
Now, how many EU countries did take it in 1992? After 1992, 1997, it is only Spain. It was Australia, which is a non-member of the EU. Great Britain took it thinking that they will invite the public funds into the private funds into public to make things balance the books. But unfortunately, they gave powers to the private, and public is suffering. So I don't think it is a policy of the European Union.
It is. It's part of the Maastricht Treaty. It's one of the budgetary controls. I think you'll find if we did a detailed analysis, perhaps of all the European countries, I don't know what their
extensively the World Bank and the IMF took it upon and then distributed it.
I mean,
is that 3% figure right? I don't think that the government is limited to 3% of GDP. That would have been about £30 billion a year, and that's not right. That's the wrong figure.
I think perhaps I've got the figure wrong. I do apologise, but I think that is a figure that.
But what you're saying is there was a restriction.
Yes, it's about budgetary control and capital spend.
Elizabeth makes an interesting point. I think that I'll look up that figure afterwards. What's interesting though is Elizabeth makes a good point here, and it's one of those times when I think you need to be clear that the European Union has become unpopular with many people because it's a political ideology. It's not just an accommodation, it's a political ideology, and to that extent, I don't know if PFI was forced upon us, but we have this capitalist agenda which doesn't fit in some places. And one of the reasons we've got the mess that we got now and these big spending cuts, as you can see in Greece, is because basically Germany and Angela Merkel speaks for all those capitalist countries who say, we don't do it the socialist way anymore and we'll punish you if you do. That's a big problem for a lot of people about the European Union.
No, but we wouldn't, no country could have punished Britain if we had not taken PFI upon ourselves, because most of the countries use Britain as a model to take up the PFI.
Well, I don't like PFI. PFI is selling the future. What you do is you sell a hospital, say, or you buy a hospital in from private sector, and you pay far more for it in the long term than if we owned it internally. Yeah. This crazy thing, we've just sold the highly profitable Channel Tunnel, which is bringing hundreds of millions of pounds a year back into the state because of an ideology, because Osborne was able to pay down something in the short term, but we would have been making money out of that for years. Now, some people say it will take them 50 years to get back on that. Mortgages are 25 years. There's a total hypocrisy in this. The government tells the public to borrow less and to manage your debts and pay it back over time, but the government itself just sells stuff off and then goes, never mind about the future. Too far away to be concerned about.
Well, Mahmoud, you keep on, you are on the PFI and you blame it upon Labour. That the NHS, the problem of NHS is Labour, Tony Blair, that brought in PFI.
No, I do say Tony Blair. Tony Blair, we don't have a presidential system. We have a cabinet system. So
yes, but it was led by Tony Blair. So Labour under Tony Blair, just as under Conservative under Major, they brought in the PFI. So why do you always blame it upon Labour? But you had a perfect opportunity to remedy the situation, and you have made it worse.
Right. I mean, who is you? I don't remember the Liberal Democrats.
The coalition, the Liberal Democrats.
Right. What coalition means that sometimes you have to go along with something that's unpopular. Just like the Conservatives had to go with something unpopular. So we've had to go along with something unpopular as well. And PFI is a dreadful idea. Should never have been done.
Why? If the state doesn't have money to expand infrastructure like the hospitals, and the private sector can bring their investment in to expand it, what makes it wrong?
I'll tell you what. I actually agree with Lembit Öpik and Elizabeth. It was selling our future.
The question is, what makes it wrong? If you don't have money to manage your property, I can manage it, and I bring in my investment.
It was also the incompetence of the last government, because no one scrutinised those contracts. It looks like someone put them there and they just simply got signed. And believe it or not, and this is voters have to be very careful of, Ed Bowles, Stephen Timms, who's the MP for this area, they were in that cabinet. They were... Just when you got to put your cross, remember that the people that were there in that cabinet are still the ones who could end up being re-elected and do it. And also, bear in mind, we got a lot of criticism when we stopped the schools future program, which was very similar.
Nick Clegg is in the cabinet. Sorry, George Osborne is in the cabinet.
Nick Clegg was not in the last Labour Party cabinet. Right,
now the 61 PFI contracts.
But in all honesty, you understand we're in a coalition, and it's about give and take. Yeah,
you can always divorce the marriage so that we can have another.
You can, and we will do that.
You can divorce.
We can do that, and we've slowly started doing that as come up to the general election.
No, not that you are about to go to the grave that is there. I've divorced my wife because she wasn't cooking
that would
good
show
food.
the immaturity of Nick Clegg and David Cameron if they did do that. A lot of parties wanted that done. They were rubbing their hands. Yeah, that this is going to happen. They're not going to be able to last long, and we could just blame everything on them. But credit said, the two leaders, although they're opposite spectrum of politics, they shown real maturity and kept the
real maturity of giving 61 PFIs and saying blame it on Labour.
Right, shown real maturity of more jobs. Yeah, all right, there's zero-hour contract. But the other thing about zero-hour contract, I just remembered. Technically speaking, you could say MPs are on a zero-hour contract. They're not hours, and matter of fact, when they call into work, they don't even get any overtime.
More jobs under which you are uncertain with your future.
I think Mahmoud's doing a valiant effort. I'm absolutely grateful for trying on this one. In 1992, when I first stood for Parliament with the Liberal Democrats, one of the things, it was 92, would you believe it? 23 years ago. It was like it
you don't look that old, Lembit.
Thanks very much indeed. That's what I was waiting for. In that case, I'm not going to criticise you, Mahmoud, now because you've been nice to me. But I will criticise the Dems because back then we were totally against PFI. All the reasons that Elizabeth said and Mahmoud said, I said, we were all against it. And also our guest here, we were all against it. But now, because we're in government, we're saying, well, it's not so bad. It is just as bad now as it was then. It would be like somebody coming in here now.
And now it's worse. Not as bad as Labour's time, but it's now worse.
Yeah, because we pay rent, basically. Instead of owning our house, we've sold it to someone. Now we pay rent to live in our own house. And you said it 61 times, we've done that. Once you add all those little bits of PFI together, you end up with a huge, big PFI bill. Instead, if we'd kept things, we'd have kept it in the family. We'd have made money on some of it. But instead, just like selling off the Channel Tunnel, which is a catastrophic, offensive thing to have done, I think, we are basically selling all the bits of revenue which would have helped to pay down the debt. So you could say, well, it's 50 years till we would have...
Lembit, you were in Parliament when the government in 2007, when government Rada borrowed money to give to the PFI contractors to execute the contract. Was it a prudent idea to have done that? Why not buying out the contract and execute it by the public itself if we can refund?
I was against it then, and I said so publicly. Some Liberal Democrats at that time were more sympathetic. Sadly for me, some of those Liberal Democrats went on to run the party. So the party has sold out on a policy where in principle and in financial practice this is the wrong thing to do. Now, Elizabeth's got the figures. She's always got much more information than the rest of us.
She's my statistical brain.
She should be the Chancellor, actually. But, and if she was the Chancellor, she would be smart enough not to sell off the family silver and pretend it's a good idea.
Actually, we sold the gold at the lowest price.
Well, Adam,
not the silver, we sold the gold.
Adam, I do have to say the Labour Party does play a very large role in this catastrophic PFI situation.
Why?
Because 1997 to 2010, 75%, I understand, of the hospitals were
given to their contract.
PFI. Yes. Even Margaret Hodge, she says we got it wrong. Now, what happened was basically there was, I don't know if it was inexperience or desperation to get the capital, or it was deemed to be a good idea at the time, but it would appear that these contracts weren't looked at properly, or if they were entered into rather cynically. I don't understand why these companies were allowed to sell off in the early years, whereby they make a huge amount of profit. I don't understand why there are price escalation clauses, and I don't understand why these companies, these PFI companies, were allowed to put the profits into tax havens. It's a huge, huge scandal. That means we lost out on a huge amount of corporation tax, and that's down to Labour.
The question is, Elizabeth,
that is down to Labour.
Couldn't the government renegotiated the contract if we see those clauses in the contract?
These contracts are about 65 years. They're 65 years long. They're long contracts. I have to
Northumberland,
say though, good news,
has bought its PFI contract, which will save the county over 34 billion.
I think that PFI almost never. It can't actually save you money. I'll tell you why. If the government runs a hospital, it doesn't have to make a profit.
Yeah.
If the government sells a hospital, it does have to make a profit because you have to run the business and you have to make a profit for your shareholders. The only way that PFI makes sense is if the efficiencies are so much greater that you can pay a profit and still save money. I don't see that happening.
But the hospitals are not charging money of the patients, is it?
But once you have a private sector business, they have to make money for their investors.
The patients are taxpayers.
That is what capitalism is all about.
And don't forget, Adam, don't forget the whistleblower, Elaine Butler. She was at Darren Valley Hospital, Dartford Hospital, which was one of the first PFI hospital in 1997. She was a whistleblower. She was the facilities manager at that hospital, and she questioned Carillion, one of the building companies who helped build and manage Darren Valley. She said that she was very concerned about the quality of the catering and the cleaning. And of course, we're aware now of how very, very important it is to have thorough cleaning of hospitals. And she said it's simply they're not acting in the public interest, they weren't providing value, and she was basically hounded out of her job.
What we need is an MP there who will be a very strong voice for Dartford. Who could that be?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
No, the problem is the contract. The contract of the PFI after extending or expanding or building of the hospital, they have to manage it in all the contracts, even procurement of furniture, equipment, and everything. They charge us with it all. You keep on saying very, very valid and very bad under Labour. Now, you are in. You should have had a different model. But worst model of what Labour implemented is what your government, your senior coalition
we've been left with a basket and we're having to defend on something.
Why couldn't you have done something different to save the country some more money?
Well, bear in mind, we don't have a Liberal majority government. We're a junior partner in a party. So it's not like if me and you had a business, you had 75% business, I had 25. I would have 25% less share and less say in it. So it must be pragmatic. It's good to throw stones, but bear in mind, it's just a greenhouse. And overall, as Limprop said, the budget did do good. We all got our homes. We have got more jobs. We've got more employment. We've got more apprenticeships. We're actually training them.
Of uncertainty.
And the thing,
you don't know when you're going to lose your job.
The voters will find this is the party, the Labour Party, they're knocking on doors saying the National Health Service is safe in our hands. No, it's not safe in their hands. And some of the people that are in that cabinet...
Neither is it safe in your hands.
Well, it's more safe in the Liberal Democrats and the Tory and Labour hands.
Elizabeth, is NHS under the coalition safe?
Came from. It was a Labour idea.
Is it safe with the coalition? Well,
no, I said Liberal.
I have to be fair. I have to be fair with the coalition because I'm always referring to Darren Valley. It's the local hospital in Dartford where I'm standing. In 2011, there was an expert analysis in that area of the contracts because there's been a big crisis because these hospital trusts are left with a situation where they simply can't afford to pay the PFI contributions. They can't pay. Then that's caused a huge burden upon the NHS. And as you rightly said, luckily, Hexham Hospital and Northumberland Trust managed to organise itself to buy out its PFI contract. Yeah. But there has been an analysis, and I think that there was going to be an examination of the Darren Valley PFI contract, but I don't know what came of that, because interestingly enough, Darren Valley PFI the PFI gets 17% of turnover, whereas the industry standard is 15%. So clearly they got a good advantage there, and they sold out quite early on, and they made a huge profit. There are 4 companies invested in Darren Valley Hospital in 1997. And Carillion invested in 1997 4 million. Then in 2003, about 7 years down the line, It sold and it made 16 million profit. So from initial stake of 4 million to 16 million in about 6-year period, 76-year period. Excellent, 50% per annum return.
You're beginning to sound quite socialist. You're beginning to sound like a socialist, and I like that, Elizabeth.
Yeah,
I like it.
I'm sorry, but there are things.
Now, let me go to our citizen friend.
Yes.
Now, without the PFI, would the government have made this drastic cut, cut of the NHS? And as patients are suffering now, so how do we relate this to PFI, where private entities are earning more money, whereas NHS, some places they are returning over 300 million to the government chest, and we are having frontline cut, reducing the medical staff, doctors, and merging and closure of some hospital facilities like the accident and emergency, and some hospitals are being closed down.
We have recently seen the latest victim of the PFI is our local Whips Cross Hospital, where basically they had to put the hospital under special measures because another bit of a trust actually has to pay this massive PFI, and Whips Cross Hospital had to cut 200 jobs. So all these jobs are going, and hospitals are expected to see more and more people and to respect all these deadlines for seeing patients, and it just cannot be done like that. I used to work for the NHS at the time when Labour was going mad with the PFIs, and there was loads of people who were warning against PFIs, saying that actually this is selling your own future, like Lembit has said, and the others, and that actually the investment by the big companies is at a very expensive price. They were not just given these massive contracts, which are unheard of, 30 years, 60 years. Some of these contracts are longer than the life of the building these contracts were building. Yeah, the contracts were mainly going for building hospital, like expansions or new buildings, but also for providing these additional services, which
laundry,
I am told,
catering,
like cleaning, and I am told, I was told at the time that was done so that Gordon Brown's books would look nicer, because that counted then as an investment rather than spending. I'm not an economist. So at the same time, we are having all these crises with all the infections in hospitals. I mean, food in hospital is horrible. These companies which are now providing these services have no experience in providing these services at all. So yes, I think PFI was an attempt of Labour government to show that they are business friendly, and they have actually given these contracts at a crazily under crazily good conditions for the government, for the corporations, and now it's time to pay back.
Do you think?
And all of it is going to be.
Do you think there's a political ideology that caused PFI to happen?
Personally, I do.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think
well.
Labour wanted to be business friendly. New Labour was business friendly. That's why they won elections, and they wanted to make this rich picking for the business. They wanted business to bring their money into the NHS, and business dictated the conditions. Personally, I think this was probably a criminal. There are elements of criminality, I personally think, in the way these contracts were done.
So shall we blame the IMF and the World Bank, which forced countries to embark upon this PFI? In Africa, they call it public-private partnership, to sell off all the public infrastructure or the asset in any country.
You blame the lawyers who didn't read the contracts properly or didn't give proper advice. You know,
but shall we blame the lawyers for lawyer couldn't have implemented it without the backing of the government?
The lawyers are there to advise the government. Furthermore, there doesn't seem to be any fair market value assessment of any of these PFI contracts. Again, I take you back to the Maastricht Treaty. There are strict capital guidelines for government spend. That comes part of the EU membership.
Can I just...
Yes.
And I think the voters would be confused at this and would need an answer to this. If it's the World Bank and if it's the Maastricht Treaty, how comes only Britain and Spain had it? What happened to the rest of European countries? How come they never took it?
Yeah, some of the European countries are doing it. Now, majority of the European countries, if you don't do it, that means you are anti-capitalist, and your government will be overthrown. They will sponsor a massive distance to overthrow. Yeah, everywhere. You have to.
To be clear, on this, as regular listeners, as you'll know, I do agree with Elizabeth. There is this underlying ideology. I think that you've implied it as well. But
Rada.
Rada's implied this correctly as well. That the European Union is not just a convenience store for doing business. The European Union has now taken it upon itself to say it's ideologically correct to have a capitalist free market privatization system, and that it's wrong to spend a lot of money, and crucially to have a system which depends on buying its way out of recession. That is why Greece is almost at war with Germany, because Greece is saying we want to do a different economic political model, and people like Angela Merkel say, no, you're not allowed to do that because that's ideologically not permitted. And Elizabeth, I'm not sure what the percentage are, we don't know that, but Elizabeth's analysis is fundamentally correct, as is Rada's, because now we are living in this authoritarian state where you're only allowed to be a capitalist, or you get punished as an individual and as a country.
Let me ask this question before you come on. If we can bail out the banks during the economic meltdown, why can't the state bail out these hospitals or the corporations under PFI contract we can
have a guess? Because the banks are part of the capitalist system and the hospitals don't have the same sway. You may not remember this, but you maybe do, but the Lloyds Bank, the Lloyds names, people who underwrote insurance, all kinds of bad things happened and they were all going to face a lot of trouble. So instead of having to shoulder the risk from which they had made millions of pounds across years, the government, the Conservative government at the time, said, don't worry, we'll bail you out, don't worry about that. So actually it's the winners who write the history. So it's asymmetrical. If Greece ends up in trouble, they say, too bad, fire your staff, give us the money back. And if a bank does it, says, don't worry too much, we'll sort it out for you. Once again, though, I didn't mind us bailing the banks out. I really mind us choosing who we support and who we don't on an ideological basis, like Rada said.
I just want to come in on this about Greece. I absolutely agree with Lembit Öpik on Greece, because what happens is, in all essence, Greece is now an occupied country economically, and what the French and Germans say is what Greece has to do. So
what the European Union
very,
is
very
saying,
seriously.
not French and Germany.
Well, French and Germany are calling the shots in all essence, just like Labour did on
I think we are digressing a bit, but this is very, very important.
It is,
just
Adam.
like why should European Union go to Nigeria and sponsor elections? Why should European Union go to Ghana and sponsor elections, whereas members of the country, as members of the states, are suffering in Europe? They go there because of their selfish economic interests. So PFI, as we all agree that it is a form of giving the capitalist society, it goes alongside with democracy. Countries like Venezuela and Latin Americans who disagree with this form of economic and socio-political ideologies always get punished by the Americans and the European Union.
I want to know, I'm very interested in Rada's perspective on this. From what you said before, I think you may have a great point of view on this. It's got worse than that. Today I heard the Home Secretary, Theresa May, say that they're going to ban certain kinds of extreme talk. We've actually got to a stage where we deal with intolerance by having an intolerant government. It doesn't work for me, Theresa, if you're listening, because you cannot secure free speech on one side by taking away from somebody else.
Absolutely.
Well, Adam, all I'll just say is, well, the PFI experiment has shown that it's a myth that the private sector is the better supplier. The PFI experiment has shown the sheer feckless negligence of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
And
would you do me a favor and add the coalition government as well, because they are worse. We learn from experience. They haven't learned anything. They've worsened the situation.
Well, you said that yourself. I don't need to. UKIP policy is to oppose PFI, and we would encourage local authorities to buy out their contracts. UKIP would encourage local authorities to buy out their PFI
like Northumbria.
Just like Northumbria, where affordable. We appreciate that in many cases it simply isn't affordable in the area that I hope to represent, Dartford, in that Kent area in 2012, I think it's about 2012, that area had to have about a 1.5 billion bailout in order to cover the cost of the PFI contracts. I mean, it's terrible.
They need to borrow from the council, just like Northumbria did, and it went to the chancellor, and it will end up getting to the taxpayer. They don't need to pay anything. They've saved some money.
But the worst part of this, I think, under Labour's watch, I'm sorry to say, but under Labour's watch, vast amounts of money have been filtered into tax havens, thus avoiding any payment of corporation tax from the fabulous profits made from PFI. I'm sure it was designed in such a way that corporation tax would come back and cover part of the bill, but no, they've been more intelligent than that and managed to not hide the money, but process the money offshore, so they've got away with it very, very well indeed.
Well, listeners, this is it. You still tune into Voice of Africa Radio. 50 minutes after 7 o'clock, you are hearing the voice of Elizabeth "The Rock" Jones, Dartford UKIP parliamentary candidate. She hasn't salvo yet. She hadn't made any boom speech yet. UKIP is becoming a scandalous political party week on week. We've been hearing a lot of things. Just put a lot of money on the bill so that I can charge it as an allowances. She's not yet in Westminster. She's in Brussels. So what is going on in Brussels? As the leader himself said, Nigel Farage said, they are living a luxurious and wonderful life in Brussels based on the taxpayers' money. Now we will go to Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu has been re-elected as the prime minister of the country, but he fought very hard by saying there wouldn't be any two-state solution, not at all, and by saying, oh, the Arabs are going to the polling station, so you have to go out and vote. Now he's lost a lot of respect with some European or some international leaders, even though most of them are not coming public. But in private, they are he's losing touch with politics. This time around, Washington was brave to have said that some of the things, statement and his actions are drawing the country away, further apart. And they are not going to provide us a diplomatic cover for Benjamin Netanyahu's actions in Israel against the Palestinians. Rada, do you foresee that under Mr. Netanyahu, the two-state solution will ever come to being?
Well, basically, Netanyahu has just said openly something that people who have interest in the area knew for a long time. He has no intention of having any kind of peace agreement with Palestinians or peace negotiations at all. You cannot be negotiating peace while you're building tens of thousands of settlement units on a stolen Palestinian land of the occupied West Bank. It doesn't work like that. It's not possible. The fact that he has said it, many people who know about this, and many Palestinians I'm in touch with, say that actually this might actually bring to a sharper focus the kind of nature of injustice that is being done to Palestinians, and might hopefully provoke a reaction by the European Union and the United States and ordinary people like us to support Palestinian struggle to end the occupation and to get a just solution for themselves. So no, I don't actually think Netanyahu has ever had any intentions to have a just settlement or any kind of settlement with Palestinians. He wants to have lots of little Bantustans, economic kind of entities, kind of see in Israeli occupation of the West Bank. And that's exactly how West Bank looks. It's kind of just a little spots of Palestinians, villages, kind of in between these massive big Israeli settlements.
But don't you think that the Palestinians themselves are not united?
Yeah, well,
and it's also a factor that is playing into the hands of Israel.
I mean, it's not easy not to be united when you live under the occupation.
But what prevents them from joining forces with Hamas, which is a political party that won the mandate, won election by people voted for Hamas? It wasn't a terrorist organization. What prevented other Palestinians to come together to support their political parties and make them an institution that represents the people rather than saying it's a terrorist organization?
Well, Hamas won with a landslide in 2005 in both Gaza and West Bank.
Sponsored by the Americans.
The moment Hamas won, and it was a big surprise because somehow all the opinion polls were showing that they will not win, The moment they were elected, they were declared a terrorist organization, and the West refused to deal with Hamas, even though they're legitimately elected by Palestinians. So they would only deal with Hamas via West Bank, via Mahmoud Abbas, who is a president there. I mean, Palestinians have been divided by the everybody, really.
Well, Lembit, the re-election of Benjamin Netanyahu, how do you see to the peace negotiations in that region? And now that Palestinian is trying to get the UN to make a law that the Israeli administration can be taken to the World Criminal Court of Justice.
That's been a recurring theme. Let me answer the core question. Rada is right. There's been very little hope of Netanyahu ever agreeing to a two-state solution, even though it seems obvious to many people, including people like me who have no vested interest in Israel and Palestine, but just an objective opinion, that that's really the way that you've got to go. These extreme angry outbursts, for example, when Netanyahu criticized the Senate in America for trying to find some kind of a more peaceful relationship with Iran, just simply shows that all he seems to think about is Israeli interest. Let's be clear now, this is nothing about the Jewish faith.
No.
Not about Semitism. This is about politics. And Netanyahu would be a bad leader, in my view, whatever country he was in charge of, because he doesn't play a collective game. It's all about being tough. Now, if an Israeli person was in this room, they'd say, well, yes, but we're very threatened. There's lots of terrorism, lots of threats from Palestine. Yes, sure, okay. But I've lived through this in Northern Ireland, where the Republicans had a military attempt at responding to what they felt was oppression from the British government. In the end, somebody had to climb down. Funnily enough, both sides did a little bit, but both sides have to be willing to do it. And I think, my opinion is that Palestine has been far more willing to negotiate than Israel, and Netanyahu is one of the obstacles. He's not part of the solution, he's part of the problem.
No, but the argument is as long as certain percentage of the Palestinian society or the Palestinians are in support of Hamas, which has been declared by a majority of the Westerners as a terrorist organization, Israel will not under any circumstance, under any way, negotiate with.
Okay, that's an easy one. There are still weapons in Northern Ireland. We, the British government, started negotiating with the IRA when they were still killing people. Thatcher did, in my view, a lot wrong to this country, but one thing she did right was start the process that led to peace. One thing that the late Mo Molan, who was Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, did very right is walk into a prison which had convicted murderers in it and start talking the talk. Yeah. That's how you get peace. I happen to have a very strong faith. We sometimes pretend that we defend Christian values in this country, but part of that is forgiveness. Part of that is to love thy enemy. The frustrating thing for me is when Netanyahu talks his very tough talk, he seems to totally disregard the culture which Israel itself, I'm not talking religiously, but the culture which he himself transported was as freedom. And sometimes he talks about tolerance. And frankly, both sides need to calm down a bit. But Netanyahu essentially shouts at the Senate in America for talking to Iran, even though that makes the world safer. Netanyahu gives no indication of actually wanting to have two-state system. I've actually got very frustrated by this because I've done a lot of work on these issues in the past when I was an MP. And for example, I'll give you one example. I started working. I was one of the people who helped found the Holocaust Education Trust. Or at least, sorry, not that. I was on the committee for that, but I helped to found the Holocaust Memorial Day. And then I started working for Press TV, so they threw me off the committee of the Holocaust Education Trust. It didn't
because Mahmoud Abbas Ahmadinejad has denied Holocaust.
Yeah, okay, but I haven't. The fact of the matter is, that's like, so why don't we do this then? We should all turn our backs on Israel because it refuses to allow international inspection of its nuclear weapons program. That's against various conventions in the country. What about the fact that Israel has been responsible for the deaths of many, many civilians? You can pick and choose on these things. And if we want to play that game, then we are in in an eye-for-an-eye situation, and everybody loses.
But now, Palestinian is trying to get it away so that some people that allegedly are perceived to have committed that crime could be taken to the International Criminal Court.
And that's great. And once again, I don't want to personalise it just to a country. There's lots of great people from Israel, and there's lots of good politicians there, and the moderates and so on. It's just the moderates aren't in charge right now. We were talking about the budget in the UK. The people I'd like to see in charge are not in charge right now. I'd like to see left-leaning government. In Israel, I'd like to see a government more willing to have a talk with people they may hate. But I'd much rather have shouting than shooting.
Well, Elizabeth, before I come to Mahmoud, our time is fast approaching to the end of our game. Elizabeth?
Yes.
Palestinian and Israeli state, the two-state solution.
Yes.
Would that be a wonderful idea if Benjamin Netanyahu is not in an office to see this country?
Well, it's all about balance and what is right and what is good for the economies there. Now, as I understand it...
Not the people, but the economy.
Economy feeds the people. Without trade,
or you could be shot by a bullet and the economy's gone away. News.
Well, I thank you very much for your time with us this evening on Voice of Africa Radio. Unfortunately, we've been through to the news. Thank you. See you next time on Voice of Africa Radio.
The Voice of Africa Radio with Afrobeats on 94 FM.
Starline Limited provides a fast, safe, efficient door-to-door shipping and freight service. We provide a safe and secure service all the way to Ghana, Nigeria, Abidjan, and many other West African countries. From containers to barrels, we take care of all your needs. We also offer a money transfer service which guarantees your money can be received within minutes. So why not give us a call today so we can provide our Starline service, shipping, freight and money transfer. Call us now on 07957 672 864. That's 07957 672 864. Starline, we'll get it there.
Fun Africa Mobile, you good talker! Improved services and more talking options. The new Phone Africa Mobile Super SIM is loaded to make your mobile life easier anywhere you are. This is big! Yes, you make roaming calls at the local rate of the country you are visiting.
This is not better living.
Listen up, y'all. Phone Africa Mobile is now bringing you more talk time and clearer lines. If you be customer, agent or shop owner, get your new Phone Africa Mobile Super SIM now. Just call 028-099-2465 or log on to phoneafricamobile.com. Hear this. All Phone Africa to Phone Africa Mobile calls are free. You hear that? Phone Africa Mobile. Connecting a mobile generation.
You said using cash machines is difficult when you're visually impaired.
My name is Chris McCausland. I'm a stand-up comedian and I'm also blind. And I'm here to tell you about these. Barclays' new talking cash machines.
They're the ones with the headphone socket. Obviously, it doesn't just blurt out. Enter pin 4, 2, 8, 7. It's a shifty bloke behind you with a hammer and a biro. Just writing your pin number on his hammer. Forgotten his pad, hasn't he?
The new talking cash machine, it's so much easier.
We've introduced over 4,000 audio cash machines across the UK.
This is the Voice of Africa Radio, broadcasting to London. If you would like information on how to advertise your business or service, if you would like to get your community information out to the people in your community, call our sales team now on 0203 28 94 940. That's 0203 28 94 940.
There's only one voice for our community. The Voice of Africa Radio with Afrobeats on 94 FM. There's only one voice for our community. The Voice of Africa Radio with Afrobeats on 94 FM.
AB Promotions in conjunction with Alorja Promotions proudly presents
Afro Candy Sunday.
This has not been seen in any nightclub before. To be held at Mystique Nightclub. There you can expect the cream of artists alongside your footballers and sports entertainment celebrities. All come to be entertained by the finest DJs. Resident DJs are DJ Ice, DJ Sour. They're holding it strong for the Afrobeat team. Guest DJs, DJ Alodia, teaming up with So Good, on rotation. And Commander B. It's free for ladies before midnight. Each and every Sunday at Mystique Nightclub, 14 Ruby Street, London, SE15 1LL. Off the Old Kent Road, behind the Old Kent Road, behind the Old Kent Road, behind the Old Kent Road.